In the frozen heart of Denver Station, a battle no one understood was about to begin. A seasoned 57-year-old ex-special ops officer walked his K-9 partner through the morning crowd, when suddenly the German Shepherd froze, not at a threat, but at a little girl, 5 years old, trembling, clutching a pink cat-shaped backpack like her life depended on it. And then, every K-9 unit in the station turned toward her at the same time, not to attack, but to protect. Something inside that small backpack was dangerous enough to trigger every instinct these dogs had ever trained for, and the secret her father left behind was about to drag the entire station into a nightmare. Stay with us to uncover the hidden truth, and don't forget to subscribe for more cinematic stories like this. A cold winter wind seeped through the tall glass panels of Denver Union Terminal. Despite the heaters humming above, the air carried a quiet bite, sharp enough to make travelers huddle deeper into their coats as they rushed through the morning bustle. John Walker, a 57-year-old former special tactics officer, walked with measured steps along the concourse floor. His broad shoulders and straight posture made him look younger than his years, but the faint stiffness in his gait spoke of old injuries, memories carved into bone from decades of missions he no longer talked about. His square jaw was shadowed by a short salt-and-pepper stubble, the kind grown by men too busy for vanity, and his storm-gray eyes, framed by fine lines, held the quiet, worn patience of someone who had seen the best and worst of humanity. Beside him padded Hunter, a sable-coated German shepherd who moved with the silent authority of a seasoned guardian. At 6 years old, Hunter was in his prime. Powerful chest, long muscular legs, and fur that shimmered with dark and amber tones when the light touched it. But it was his eyes, deep, warm, almost soulful, that drew attention. They carried a gentle sincerity that contrasted starkly with his intimidating build. John trusted that gaze more than he trusted most men. They worked unofficially together now, volunteering for station security sweeps in the mornings. Retirement had not softened John's instincts. If anything, the years had made them sharper, quieter, more introspective. He carried invisible weight, grief from losing teammates, guilt from missions that ended in collateral he still dreamt about, and a loneliness that seeped into him after his wife left during his final years in the service. Hunter had filled a void he hadn't known was still bleeding. As they moved through the terminal, crowds parted slightly in subtle admiration. A tall barista with tattoos down her pale arms paused while wiping a counter. A businessman in a charcoal suit, slim, tired, with a nervous habit of adjusting his tie, glanced at the pair with lingering curiosity. A teenage boy in a red hoodie lowered his headphones, dark curls bouncing as he leaned over to whisper to his friend, "Dude, that dog looks like he can smell fear." But neither John nor Hunter paid attention. Their steps were coordinated, rhythmic, as if decades of military training flowed from John into the dog and back again. John scanned left to right, noting bags, body language, and gait patterns of passengers. Hunter kept his nose low, pulling in scents, categorizing them with instinctual precision. "Easy, buddy," John murmured, reaching down to give a brief scratch behind Hunter's ear, the spot that always made him relax. Hunter's ears flicked once, acknowledging the affection, before returning fully to work. They rounded the corner toward the vending machines, where the crowd thinned. John was mid-scan when Hunter suddenly stopped. Not paused, stopped. His entire body locked in place, tail stiffening horizontally, pupils narrowing. Then, his fur bristled from neck to spine. John froze. In all the years he'd known Hunter, there were only 2 triggers for that reaction: explosive-level threat or danger directed at a person in immediate proximity. "Hunter," he whispered, but the dog did not look at him. Hunter inhaled deeply, snout slightly raised as if catching the faintest echo of something no human could sense. Then he moved, fast. A sudden burst of speed, claws scraping the polished floor, the dog shot forward like a launched arrow. Passengers gasped and stepped aside as John sprinted after him, his knees protesting every stride. Hunter didn't bark, he ran silent, which was worse. Silent meant urgency, silent meant fear. And John felt a slice of panic tighten in his chest. He chased Hunter around a column and saw the target. A little girl. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. She stood alone beside the vending machine like a delicate shadow left behind by rushing crowds. Her hair was long, black, slightly tangled, falling over her small blue jacket. She hugged her arms to her chest, shivering faintly, not from cold, but something deeper, something like confusion or fear. The girl's wide brown eyes lifted. Startled by the sudden movement, she stepped back instinctively as Hunter closed in. But the German Shepherd did not attack. Instead, he planted himself directly in front of her, body angled forward protectively, and let out a deep, thunderous bark that cracked the air. People turned. Conversations died. A woman dropped her coffee, the cup rolling in a slow arc along the tile. A security guard near the turnstiles instinctively reached for his radio. But Hunter did not move. His stance was rigid, defensive. His ears pinned back slightly, not in aggression, but warning. "Hunter, heel!" John barked, breathless as he skidded to a stop. But Hunter ignored him. Another bark erupted, sharp, rhythmic, like tribal drums calling warriors to attention. The girl flinched, clutching the vending machine behind her. "Hey, hey there!" John's voice softened instantly, trained reflexively to calm children. "It's okay. He won't hurt you." But as he studied her face, something felt off. Her lips trembled too faintly. Her body was too still. Children lost in public places usually cry, call for help, look around. But this little girl looked frozen, caught between worlds. Her small fingers clutched the side of her jacket so tightly her knuckles turned white. John knelt slowly, keeping his hands visible. He'd been trained to negotiate with armed suspects, but somehow this moment demanded even greater gentleness. "Sweetheart," he murmured, his voice warm and steady. "Are you alone? Where's your mom or dad?" The girl stared at him, blinking as though she were trying to understand the question. A tiny tremor ran through her shoulders, but she said nothing, not a word. John felt the uneasy prick of instinct creep up his neck. He glanced at Hunter. The dog was trembling, not out of fear, but out of intense alertness. He sniffed the air around the girl's legs, then around the vending machine, then suddenly back to her again, circling her slowly but keeping his body between her and the crowd. People gathered at a distance, whispering. "What's wrong with the dog? Is she dangerous? Maybe she has something on her?" "Dogs don't act like that for no reason." John raised a hand toward the nearest bystanders. "Everyone, please keep distance." Then he focused on the girl again. Her lashes fluttered. For a split second, John saw something raw in her gaze, fear so deep it looked ancient. He recognized it instantly. He had seen that expression in the eyes of civilians after bombings, in children pulled from wreckage in faraway countries, in victims who had witnessed things no child should ever see. The girl opened her mouth. A thin, broken whisper slipped out. "Help!" It was almost inaudible, but Hunter heard it. His ears twitched and he barked again with fierce urgency. Once, twice, 3 times, the way he did when alerting to imminent danger. Something was very wrong, and Hunter sensed it before John did. The terminal's noise faded. Even the announcements overhead seemed distant. The little girl, trembling, looked up at John with eyes full of silent pleading. And Hunter, bristling, stepped forward, forming a barrier between the child and the world around them. The war drum rhythm of his bark echoed again, warning, commanding, protecting. In that instant, the shadows in the terminal felt alive, and none of the onlookers, nor even John himself, yet understood the truth. Hunter had not found a threat. He had found someone who needed saving. The hum of the terminal seemed to tighten like a wire pulled to its limit as John slowly rose from his crouched position, his hand hovering just inches from the frightened child. The overhead lights flickered faintly, not from any electrical issue, but from the shifting tension rippling through the wide station hall. Travelers murmured anxiously, watching the strange scene unfold with a collective breath held in their throats. Hunter stood rooted in front of the girl, his body rigid, tail stiff, his low growl vibrating through the tiles beneath them. His pupils were blown wide, dark as obsidian, locked onto the small cat-shaped backpack the girl was clutching with both arms. The backpack was pink with soft felt ears, but smudged with dirt and frayed at the zipper, well-loved but now trembling in her hands like a frightened heart. The girl's small fingers clamped so tightly around its straps that her knuckles had turned a chalky white. John spoke gently, his voice carrying the careful steadiness of a man who had diffused explosives and talked down gunmen, but who now faced a different kind of fragility. "Sweetheart, your name. What's your name, honey?" Her lips parted, trembling. Mia." Her voice sounded like snow melting on stone, soft, hesitant, and carrying an ache too old for a child her age. Mia looked no more than 5, maybe 6 at most, with a delicate frame. Her long black hair fell in disarray over her pale face, and her wide brown eyes shimmered with something deeper than fear, something like exhaustion, like she'd been running for far longer than her tiny legs could bear. "All right, Mia," he whispered. "You're doing great. Can you show me your bag?" She shook her head violently, gripping the backpack tighter. No, I can't. They told me not to open it." John's breath hitched, and his gaze flicked to Hunter, who had begun pacing in a tight arc around Mia, tracing the perimeter of an invisible danger. Each step was sharp and precise, his muscles coiled with tension. A shiver of instinct rippled through him, one John had learned never to dismiss. The first officer to approach was Mark Diaz, a lean man in his early 30s with light olive skin, deep-set dark eyes, and a well-trimmed beard that outlined a jaw hardened by years of working high-pressure situations. Diaz was known to be calm under fire, but blunt to a fault, a man shaped by growing up in a rough neighborhood where softness was a luxury. "John," Diaz muttered, lowering his voice. "The dog looks like he's about to drag her behind a wall. What's he smelling?" "Something inside the bag," John answered. "He's not guarding against her. He's guarding her." Before Diaz could respond, a high-pitched beeping erupted from the far end of the hall. Heads snapped toward the sound. It came from the portable scanning wand of Officer Lillian Gray, a tall woman with sandy blonde hair pulled into a tight braid and sharp, green eyes that noticed everything. With her athletic build and stern expression softened only by her freckles, she carried herself with the quiet, firm confidence of someone who survived on discipline and instinct. Gray frowned deeply as her device blinked red, the light pulsing like a heartbeat. "Sir," she called to John, her voice tight, "I'm picking up a high-density metallic signature near your location. Something small, but unusual." As if on cue, Hunter barked, a deep, explosive sound, and stepped closer to Mia, his body forming a shield again. John felt cold air skim the back of his neck. The station's atmosphere changed. It wasn't fear anymore. It was alarm. Mia whimpered, pressing her face into the top of her backpack. "I didn't know," she whispered, as if confessing a terrible secret to the ground. "I didn't know they put it in there." Diaz crouched slightly, lowering himself to Mia's eye level, his usual blunt tone softened by the sight of her trembling. "Who told you not to open it, sweetheart?" Mia swallowed, tears welling. "The man at the bus stop. He said it was broken and he needed to fix it. He said Daddy would want me to keep it safe. So I did." Her voice broke, and she buried her face deeper into the bag. The crowd behind them gasped and murmured louder. "John," Gray called urgently, "the signature is getting stronger." The next moment came like the shatter of glass. An older security officer named Henry Collins, tall and barrel-chested with thinning silver hair and a fatherly demeanor, ran toward the scene carrying a secondary portable detector. Henry was known among staff for his calm and kindness, a man who brought donuts to rookies on their first shift. But today, his usually warm brown eyes were filled with dread. He held the detector over the backpack. It screamed. Lights turned red. A warning tone filled the hall, harsh and sharp. Panic erupted instantly. A young mother grabbed her toddler and stumbled backward. A businessman dropped his briefcase and sprinted. A teenage girl screamed, covering her ears. The alarm system in the terminal automatically triggered flashing emergency lights, bathing the hall in pulses of crimson. "Evacuate the immediate area," Henry shouted, waving his arms. Move back now!" But Hunter did not move. He barked at every angle, forcing even officers to hesitate. John grabbed the leash but stopped himself. Hunter's instincts were razor accurate. If he wanted people kept back, there was a reason. Gray moved to guide passengers away, her voice booming with authority as she herded the crowd. Diaz pulled out his radio and barked into it. "Dispatch, this is Officer Diaz at Denver Union Terminal. We need an emergency lockdown of the East Concourse. Potential hazardous device. Repeat, possible hazardous device. John knelt again, his heart pounding in his ears. "Mia," he said, steady but urgent, "I need you to give me the bag, sweetheart. You'll be safe. I promise." Mia cried harder, shaking. "I didn't know. I didn't know." John reached out slowly. "It's okay. Just hand it to me. Let me help you." She hesitated, then began lifting the bag with trembling hands. But as soon as she loosened her grip, Hunter barked in a sharp, cutting rhythm that made everyone freeze. He wasn't warning the girl, he was warning John. Something inside that backpack was unstable, perhaps movement sensitive, perhaps pressure triggered. John lowered his hand instantly. "All right," he murmured. "We're going to do this differently. Mia, don't move, don't let go. You're doing perfect." Gray approached carefully, scanning the space for any other hazards. Henry stood nearby, sweat beading on his forehead. Diaz tapped the holster at his hip nervously, scanning faces in the crowd for anything else, fear or guilt or intent. "John," Gray said through clenched teeth, "whatever's in there, it's not standard." Before John could respond, Mia raised her tear-streaked face toward him and whispered, barely audible through the chaos. He said, "Daddy left something important. And that bad people want it." John felt every muscle in his body harden. Hunter's growl deepened. The K9 unit dogs from the far end of the terminal, 3 lean, disciplined shepherds led by handlers, rushed forward in synchronized formation. One was named Tango, a wiry sable male with a clipped ear from a past rescue mission. Another was Bella, a 5-year-old black and tan female with sharp intelligence. And the third was Atlas, a massive, imposing shepherd with a thick coat and calm, old-soul demeanor. As soon as they approached, all 3 dogs slowed, tails stiffening, their eyes locking on Mia from a distance. Then, in eerie unison, they shifted position around her, forming a protective arc that completed Hunter's circle, a wall of fur and muscle, a shield forged from instinct and training. The crowd went silent again, watching the animals' inexplicable coordination. John stood up slowly, realization dawning like a cold sunrise. Whatever was happening, the dogs knew before any human did. The station's alarms blared, red lights pulsed, panic rippled through the hall. Yet there, in the center of the storm, stood a trembling child, a man scarred by his past, and a circle of loyal animals that refused to back down. And in that frozen moment, everyone understood something unmistakable. Mia was not the threat. She was the target. John's pulse hammered against his ribs as the alarms continued to pulse red across the terminal. Hunter kept his rigid stance in front of Mia, barking in controlled bursts, each bark perfectly timed, almost strategic. The other K9s maintained their protective arc, their bodies forming a barrier of instinct and silent loyalty. John could see the terror in Mia's eyes growing deeper, as though she was beginning to understand something far worse than the bag she'd been told to guard. Then, a frantic voice split the chaos. "Mia! Mia!" A woman shoved her way through the thickening crowd, stumbling past passengers and pushing aside 2 startled officers who tried to halt her. She was in her early 30s, tall but slender, with long dark brown hair matted against her cheeks from sweat and cold. Her features were soft but drawn tight with exhaustion, high cheekbones, rounded jawline, and eyes the color of wet earth, wide with raw panic. Her clothes, a simple navy coat over a gray sweater, hinted at rushed decisions and sleepless nights, and her breath came in jagged bursts as she ran. This was a woman carrying fear like a second skin. She dropped to her knees beside Mia, pulling the child into her arms with such desperation that even Diaz hesitated, lowering his radio. Hunter barked once, deep, assessing, but quickly lowered his head, as if recognizing her scent and her terror as genuine. "I'm her mother," the woman gasped between sobs. "Please, please don't take her from me." John stepped forward carefully. "Ma'am, we need to understand what's going on. Your daughter is carrying something dangerous and—" "I know," she whispered, her voice cracking like thin ice. "God help me. I know." John paused. He'd been expecting confusion, denial, maybe anger, but not this. She held Mia close, pressing trembling kisses against the girl's forehead. "My name is Rebecca," she said shakily, lifting her face toward John. Her eyes shimmered with that unmistakable shine of someone carrying a secret too heavy to bear. "Rebecca Hale," she clarified, voice lower. "Please, tell me the device hasn't activated." Gray stiffened behind John. "Device?" Rebecca flinched, clutching Mia tighter as if the word itself were a bullet. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered. "David never meant for it to get this far." John exchanged a sharp look with Diaz. "Who's David?" The question broke something inside Rebecca. She swallowed hard, the motion stiff, deliberate. "My husband," she whispered. "Mia's father. He's missing." John felt an uneasy dread beginning to stir. Rebecca's hands trembled as she pushed a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "David was a military telecommunications engineer," she began, voice shaking. "Smart, too smart, always working late, always digging deeper than he should." Her eyes drifted downward, unfocused. 3 months ago, he discovered a breach. Someone was infiltrating a secure research network through a back door in one of the systems he built. He tried reporting it. He tried doing it the right way. She inhaled sharply. 2 days later, he was gone. The terminal noise seemed to fade around them. "Gone as in disappeared?" Gray pressed, her expression hardened with suspicion. Rebecca nodded weakly. "They said it was an accident, but I knew they had taken him." "They?" Diaz asked. Rebecca closed her eyes as if summoning courage. "A high-level tech syndicate. They recruit geniuses, hackers, engineers, and if they refuse, they disappear. David refused." John felt his jaw tighten. The pieces were beginning to form a shape he didn't like. Rebecca pointed shakily at Mia's backpack. "Before he vanished, David sent me a message. One terrified line. 'They're coming. Take Mia and run.' And then a second line, hours later. 'Protect the seed.'" "Seed?" John echoed. Rebecca nodded. "A prototype encryption module he'd been building. A chip that could rewrite secure communication channels in seconds. If replicated, it could infiltrate military networks without trace. He hid it inside one of Mia's toys, because he knew no one would suspect a child." John stared at Mia's trembling hands gripping the cat-shaped bag. "That's what's inside." Rebecca nodded. "The seed. If they get it, they win." Gray knelt beside them, lowering her scanner with utmost care. "Ma'am, this device is volatile. It's reacting to something. Movement, heat, possibly a secondary trigger." Rebecca's face drained of color. "No. God, no." John placed a hand gently on Mia's back. "Sweetheart, you're safe. We're going to take care of you, I promise." But Hunter suddenly snapped his head toward the far glass wall of the terminal. His body stiffened like struck stone. His growl was low, warning, vibrating from his chest like a storm barely held back. "What now?" Diaz muttered. Gray followed Hunter's stare. At first, she saw only the reflection of flashing red lights on the glass. Then, movement. A figure in a long black coat stood pressed against the outer walkway, partially hidden behind a pillar. He was tall, with broad shoulders beneath the heavy coat and dark hair partially obscuring a sharp, angular face. His posture was rigid, but his eyes, cold and glinting even through the glass, were fixed directly on Mia, as if she were prey. His hands were jammed into his coat pockets, but the tension across his shoulders betrayed intent. Dangerous intent. Rebecca's entire body jolted. "That's him!" "Who?" John demanded. "The man who fixed Mia's toy," she breathed. "The one who told her it was what her father wanted." Hunter barked with sudden ferocity, so sharp the nearest passengers screamed and ducked. John stood instantly, muscles firing. But the man outside took one final look at Mia and turned. Not walking, running. Sprinting down the walkway and disappearing behind the row of shuttle buses. Hunter lunged forward, pulling so hard the leash nearly snapped from John's grip. "Diaz!" John shouted. "He's fleeing!" Diaz was already sprinting toward the exit, Gray close behind, shouting orders into her radio. Henry signaled backup, waving security toward the doors. The crowd surged and scattered again, alarms blaring in a fever pitch. Rebecca clutched Mia, both trembling as Hunter growled at the door, every nerve in his body screaming pursuit. John looked at the terrified mother and child, at the frantic K9s, at the empty space where the man had stood. The truth crystallized like frost inside him. Mia wasn't holding a threat. She was the target, and the enemy had just revealed himself. The cold burst through the terminal doors like a living force when John slammed out into the open air, the winter wind slicing across his face and stinging his eyes. Snowflakes spiraled wildly from the gray sky above Denver's station courtyard, swirling in a chaotic dance that blurred edges and swallowed footprints almost as soon as they formed. The city lights flickered against the icy gusts, and every breath John drew felt sharp enough to cut. But he didn't slow. Hunter shot ahead of him, a streak of sable and muscle tearing across the snow-covered pavement. His ears were pinned forward, his tail low, his paws kicking up white powder as he followed the scent of the fleeing man in the black coat. John's instincts, the ones honed by years in special ops, ignited like a fuse. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing, only pursuit. Behind him, Diaz and Gray stormed through the exit doors, shouting commands into their radios. More officers followed, though their shapes quickly blurred behind the wall of snowfall. The terminal alarms faded as the storm swallowed the sound. Hunter veered southeast toward the shuttle lanes, his body low and tense. John sprinted after him, boots slipping against patches of ice. His knees screamed in protest, old injuries flaring, but adrenaline muffled the pain. He could feel every thud of his heartbeat echoing in his skull. Ahead of him, the man in the black coat emerged from behind a bus shelter, nearly colliding with a driver stepping out of a shuttle. The driver, a stocky man in his 40s with a thick brown beard and a neon vest stretched over a round belly, shouted in surprise, stepping back as the fugitive shoved past him without a glance. The man's hood flew back, revealing a sharp, angular jaw coated with several days of stubble. His cheekbones were high and severe, framing eyes that burned with a cold, predatory intelligence. He was lean but athletic, his long strides fueled by desperation and something darker, training. Not a common criminal, not a petty thug. Someone used to running, someone used to being hunted. Hunter let out a thunderous bark, a sound that crashed through the storm like rolling thunder. The man whipped his head toward the dog, eyes flashing, and broke into a sprint toward a dark SUV idling near the edge of the lot. The vehicle sat beneath a flickering streetlight, its windows tinted, its engine rumbling low like a beast waking from sleep. "John!" Gray shouted behind him. "He's armed! We saw a holster!" John didn't answer. He was already too focused. The fugitive yanked open the SUV door and threw himself inside, slamming it shut. The engine roared. The wheels spun violently on the icy concrete, but Hunter was faster. With a guttural snarl that tore from deep in his chest, the German shepherd launched himself upward. His claws scraped the hood. His weight slammed onto the metal with a muffled thud. The SUV fishtailed, sliding dangerously near the bus lanes as Hunter held his stance on the hood, his body crouched like a striking wolf. The fugitive swore inside the car and jerked the wheel, trying to shake the dog off. But Hunter dug his claws in deeper, lips peeled back to reveal sharp white teeth. His growl vibrated through the metal, resonating like distant thunder. The man reached for something at his side, his handgun. John saw the glint of cold steel. "Hunter!" John roared, not a command, a warning. Hunter reacted instantly, springing toward the windshield, snarling directly at the man's face. The fugitive flinched instinctively, raising his arm to protect himself instead of grabbing his weapon. That hesitation, one small fraction of a second, was all John needed. With a battle-hardened roar, he closed the distance, wrenched open the driver's door, and yanked the man out with brutal efficiency. The two stumbled into the snow, grappling violently. The fugitive swung a fist, fast, trained, but John blocked it, twisting the attacker's wrist and slamming him into the icy ground. The man thrashed, spitting curses, but years of combat had carved John's strength into something immovable, unyielding. Hunter leapt down and circled them, barking intensely as Gray and Diaz arrived, guns drawn, boots crunching through snow. Diaz pinned the man's other arm to the ground. "Denver PD!" he shouted. "Do not move!" The fugitive snarled but stopped resisting when Hunter pressed his teeth lightly against the man's sleeve, a silent reminder of what defiance would cost him. Gray patted the man down quickly, retrieving a handgun, 2 burner phones, and a small encrypted flash drive coated with frost. "He's definitely not just some stalker," she muttered. The man glared up at John, his pale lips curled into a dark smile. "You're too late," he he rasped, voice low and gritty. "You have no idea how big this is." John tightened his grip on the man's collar. "Then start talking." The fugitive hesitated, glancing at Hunter. Something shifted in his expression, not fear, but resignation, as if he knew that whatever future awaited him, it was already sealed. "They're holding him in the mountains," he muttered bitterly. "Your missing engineer, David Hale." Rebecca's words echoed in John's mind. David, still alive. "Where?" Gray demanded. The man licked his lips, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. "Old storage warehouse, abandoned military site, 40 miles west. They're extracting the rest of his access codes by force." John felt a surge of anger burn hot against the cold wind. "Coordinates," he growled. The fugitive snorted. "You won't make it in time anyway." But when Hunter pressed closer, growling deep, the man quickly spat out the numbers. Diaz confirmed them through dispatch. Gray's eyes widened. "The location checks out. There was an old storage complex there before it shut down 10 years ago." Snow thickened in the Iuyat air, falling in heavy sheets now, coating the ground and muffling the sounds of the continued chaos near the terminal. Officers arrived in waves, surrounding the SUV and detaining the captive. Emergency lights strobed across the courtyard like flashes of red lightning. Rebecca emerged from the terminal doors a moment later, clutching Mia tightly against her chest, her long brown hair whipping in the fierce wind. Her face was pale, stricken with both hope and terror. "Is he alive?" John said, voice steady, "and we're going to get him back." Rebecca's knees buckled slightly, tears scattering into the wind. Mia buried her face into her mother's shoulder, clutching her tightly. Within minutes, tactical rescue teams assembled near the perimeter. The officers were a mix of SWAT and specialized field agents, moving with crisp efficiency. Their leader was Sergeant Aaron Bishop, a tall, broad-shouldered man in his mid-40s with close-cropped black hair and a scar along his jawline from a failed negotiation years ago. That scar had shaped him, made him firmer, colder, exact in every calculation. Bishop approached John with a curt nod, his deep-set hazel eyes steady despite the storm. "Walker, heard you got the location." "We're heading out now," John replied. Bishop glanced at Rebecca and Mia, then at Hunter. "You're coming too," he said. "Dog's the only reason we found our lead." Hunter barked once, proud and ready. John looked toward the distant mountains, their jagged peaks swallowed by darkness and snow. Somewhere out there, David Hale was alive, waiting, weakening, hoping. And Hunter seemed to sense it too. The German shepherd stepped forward, nose pointed toward the horizon, ears sharp, posture alert, as if he could hear a faint heartbeat calling through the storm. "All right, partner," John murmured, placing a hand on Hunter's warm fur. "Lead the way." And as the rescue convoy roared to life, tearing into the winter night, it felt as though the storm itself parted for them, guided by the instinct of a dog who had already proven he could sense the truth before any human dared to see it. The convoy carved through the mountain road like a line of fire cutting across the night. Snow spiraled from the heavens in glittering arcs, swept sideways by the wind that howled along the ridges. The storm had intensified, turning the world into a blur of white and shadow, but the tactical team pressed forward with tire chains clattering and engines growling through the cold. Inside the lead vehicle, John Walker sat with his elbows on his knees, his fingers laced tightly together. The dim interior lights cast stark shadows across his weathered face, deepening the lines etched over years of battles he tried to forget. His storm-gray eyes were fixed on the road ahead, but inside them flickered something else. Determination sharpened to a blade's edge. Hunter sat pressed against his leg, head lifted, ears alert. The German shepherd's breath fogged the cold air each time he exhaled, and his golden-brown eyes remained locked on the shifting darkness beyond the windows. It was as though he sensed the faint echo of the man they were trying to save. Rebecca Hale sat in the vehicle behind them, wrapped in a thick emergency blanket. Her long brown hair fell around her shoulders in tangled waves, and her face, though still pale, carried a fragile hope. Her arms encircled Mia, who lay curled in her lap beneath the blanket. The little girl's dark lashes fluttered as she drifted between exhausted sleep and quiet whimpers, her small fingers clutching her mother's coat. Rebecca would occasionally smooth Mia's hair with trembling hands, her eyes red from crying but alive with resolve. She was a woman who had lived in fear for months, but tonight there was something new in her posture, steel being reforged. At the front, Sergeant Aaron Bishop drove the lead SUV with iron focus. His broad shoulders were rigid beneath his tactical jacket, and the faint scar along his jawline caught the glow of the dashboard lights. He had commanded high-risk missions across the world, but even he felt the weight of this one. A father torn from his family, a child used as a pawn, a dangerous device hidden in innocence. It echoed old failures he carried deep beneath his stoic exterior. "Warehouse is 2 miles out," Bishop said, voice low but steady. "We go in silent, no gunfire unless necessary." John nodded, hand resting on Hunter's harness. The dog let out a quiet rumble, sensing the shift in energy. Bishop flicked a glance at John. "You good?" John exhaled slowly. "I will be when we bring that man back." A ghost of a smile crossed Bishop's scarred face. "Then let's finish this." The convoy slowed as they approached the abandoned military site. The massive warehouse loomed like a dying beast against the swirling night, its corrugated metal walls covered in frost and old bullet scars. A single dim light flickered above the rusted side door. The snow muffled every sound except the crunch of boots as the team disembarked. Hunter leaped to the ground beside John, his paws sinking into fresh snow, breath rising in pale clouds. Bishop signaled the approach with a raised fist. The team fanned out silently, forming a perimeter. 2 officers, a pair of twins named Carter and Cole Turner, mid-30s with identical sharp features and black tactical beards, stood guard at the rear side. They were known for their synchronization, communication without words, shaped by a tough childhood in foster care where they learned to rely solely on each other. At the front, a young agent named Sophia Lane eased forward to check the door. She was in her late 20s, petite but wiry, with short blonde hair and sharp eyes behind rectangular glasses. A former cybersecurity analyst, she had switched to field work after a devastating system breach overseas that cost her a colleague she had admired. The memory had hardened her, sharpened her instincts, and tonight her expression carried a mix of fear and fierce determination. "Door's unlocked," she whispered. "That's not a good sign." Bishop exchanged a look with John. "Walker, you and Hunter take point." John gave a firm nod. He cracked the door open, and a gust of icy air swept out, carrying a faint metallic scent. Hunter's ears twitched, his body lowered into a stalking posture. John followed the dog inside. The warehouse interior swallowed them in darkness, broken only by the weak glow of emergency lights along the ceiling. Crates were stacked haphazardly around the room, casting jagged shadows. Old machinery lay abandoned beneath sheets of frost. But beneath the stillness was something else, a rhythmic, faint sound. Breathing. Painful breathing. Hunter's head snapped toward the far corner. He growled low. John edged forward, careful not to disturb debris. Bishop and Lane followed, guns raised but unseen in the dim corridors of shadows. Then they saw him. David Hale, the missing engineer. He sat slumped against a metal column, wrists bound, his face bruised and swollen. His dark hair was matted, and his once neat features bore the marks of harsh interrogation, but his chest rose, shallow, struggling, alive. "Oh my God," Lane whispered. "He's breathing." John hurried forward, knife drawn, cutting the restraints. David blinked sluggishly, eyes half open. His voice was a rasping whisper. "Rebecca. Mia. They're safe," John said softly. "We found them." A tear slipped from David's swollen eye, carving a thin path through the grime on his cheek. "Thank God." Hunter pressed his nose gently to David's knee, tail lowering in soft relief. Suddenly, footsteps echoed from the far end of the warehouse. Bishop spun. Movement! A final remnant of the syndicate tried to flee through a side exit. A man in a dark tactical jacket with a shaved head and a jagged scar across his left eyebrow. He was tall, broad, with a cold, calculating stride. But the team was faster. Cole Turner swept behind him, knocking, the weapon from his hand. Carter slammed him to the ground, and Bishop secured the cuffs with a swift, practiced motion. "Syndicate is neutralized," Bishop called. "All clear." Outside, the storm began to break. When John carried David toward the exit, Rebecca erupted into sobs. "David!" She ran toward him, clutching him as though afraid he would disappear again if she loosened her grip for even a moment. Mia wriggled out of her blanket and threw herself into her father's arms with a cry that pierced the last remnants of night. Hunter sat beside them, tail thumping gently, watching the reunion with warm, gentle eyes. The sun began to rise over the mountains, washing the snow in a soft, golden glow. It spilled across the warehouse, over the rescue team, and over the reunited family, like the hand of Apollo himself lifting the world from darkness. It was rebirth. In the following days, the syndicate was fully dismantled. Federal agencies secured the encryption SEED, preventing global catastrophe. The Hale family, now under protection, received new identities and a safe new home. When the time came for goodbyes, Rebecca hugged John tightly, whispering through trembling gratitude. David thanked him with a look that carried more weight than words. Mia, small and brave, hugged Hunter for several long minutes, burying her face in his fur. Eventually, the family disappeared into a convoy of protective vehicles, beginning a new life far away. John stood watching the snowy road long after they were gone. For the first time in years, he felt the heaviness in his chest lighten. Peace was rare and precious. Weeks passed. One crisp morning, as John returned from a walk with Hunter through a quiet Denver park, he found a small envelope in his mailbox. The handwriting on the front was uneven, round, childlike. He opened it. Inside was a simple note written in bright blue crayon. "Tell Hunter he's my hero, and you're my guardian angel, Mr. John." A small drawing of a German shepherd, tail wagging, sat beneath the words. John let out a breath that wavered like the dawn breeze. He looked down at Hunter, who bumped his leg gently with his head. "We did good, partner," John whispered. And for the first time in a long time, the world felt warm. In the end, this story isn't just about a rescue, a family reunited, or a syndicate brought to justice. It's about something much quieter and much more powerful. It reminds us that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks beside us on four legs with a steady heartbeat and eyes that see truths we overlook. It reminds us that even in the coldest storms of life, there are people and creatures who will stand between us and the darkness, simply because it's in their nature to protect. And maybe, in our everyday lives, we all have a Hunter somewhere, a friend who refuses to give up on us, a loved one who shields us in silence, or a reminder that no one survives their battles alone. Stories like this are more than entertainment. They're a reminder that hope is real, that bravery still exists, and that kindness, even hidden beneath scars, can change someone's world. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you believe a little more in second chances, then don't let it end here. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that heroes still walk among us. Comment below. Which moment moved you the most? Subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story of courage, loyalty, and the extraordinary bond between humans and their four-legged guardians. And don't forget to hit like. It helps our stories reach more hearts around the world.